Wow, here I am again. Part of my commitment to provide more content. Yes, the Reactionary Hippie back, and it's only November 13th. What is it? 13? Yeah, November 13, 2022. So I come to you in the wake of first Veterans Day. My hometown does a great job celebrating Veterans Day. I mean, the bell ringers from the VFW and the American Legion come through town early in the morning. We have a great parade that starts at 11 o'clock, of course. And when you look around, you kind of realize it's not so common. So good for you, Loveland, Colorado, with your great Veterans Day parade. We were out there with the kids, waving and cheering and showing the colors and celebrating our veterans. Being the way I am, a reactionary hippie, I have to think about some of the other aspects of this holiday and also remind people that it was originally Armistice Day and called Remembrance Day in Commonwealth countries. We're remembering the civilization-shattering Great War, what we call World War I now. The war that was not the war to end all wars, the war that destroyed a civilization. And in so many ways, we're just walking in the ruts that were created by that war. We're picking up the pieces and living in the ruins created by that war. But don't want to lose you all now with those unhappy thoughts. I do give thanks to our veterans. I just want us to think about the costs of war and how we tried to destroy European civilization in that terrible war. At least we're around to talk about it now, and perhaps better things can come. Oh, and I'm also talking to you in the wake of the midterm elections of 2022. I was very shy to comment about those before, but I did venture to say that I thought the Republicans would do very well, and I was wrong. Why did I say that? I said I thought they'd do well because there were heavy hitter Democrats in New York State right before the election. So I thought, well, if they think they've got to go to New York to shore things up, then surely they think Arizona, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Nevada, a bunch of other states, Georgia, a bunch of other states where things would be close were probably lost. So they just had to shore up the damage. It was actually just the opposite. The incredible wave of mail-in ballots for Democratic candidates saved the day for the Democrats and actually really undercut the conventional wisdom that when an incumbent president is so unpopular and inflation is high and there are economic difficulties, surely the party out of power would do well. But they didn't. And it's kind of a mystery. I don't think the Republicans articulated a very convincing national message, but still they probably shouldn't have had to by conventional wisdom. So, as is often the case, conventional wisdom is always fighting the last war. Are there any lessons to learn? I'll stop pretending I'm an expert on politics and get these out of the way, move on to something else. But I would say there maybe are two lessons. The first lesson is that having an endorsement by Donald Trump wasn't as bad as the national media said, and it didn't mean you were some conspiracy theorist, but it really didn't help in close races. It certainly didn't help at all in my home state of Colorado. On the other hand, if you weren't identified with Trump, but you pursued and articulated populist Trump-like policies, and I've said, I think before, that I like many aspects of Trumpism, if that's fair, without Trump and his terrible flaws. If you were able to express those policies independently, you did well. I mean, Ohio and Florida were sweeps for the Republicans, strangely enough. They're formerly big swing states. But you had DeSantis and you had J.D. Vance. Now, I know J.D. Vance ran behind DeWine, but Vance is the more interesting figure here because he has been very forthright about his populist policies. He has said, I admire what Trump did without being a toady to Trump. I like J.D. Vance. I think he's a harbinger of the future. We'll see. But that's one lesson. The other lesson is one reason the swing and the red wave did not happen is because elections are getting more sticky, more frozen. And I think there are two reasons. One is the elections are becoming much more ideological and national, meaning people are not voting on what they see around them or what's particular to them, but to the tribe that they identify with on social media and in national politics. I think early voting actually encourages this because it says, let's all collect everything from our team systematically as soon as possible, get all these ballots in, and build it up. And that, I guess it's a defensible model to win that way if those are the rules. But it's, in my mind, so far from the ideal of the individual voter, still embedded in the community and talking to people, but going through the whole process of a campaign, living life and thinking, I can't pay attention to the election. I can't, okay, it's getting closer. I got to pay attention. Listening to some debates, reading some literature, all the way up to election day, gathering information to make a decision. Well, there's less of that now with early voting. It's just like, well, you're on this team, check the box, get the ballot in the mail. We'll even collect it for you and drop it off, whatever. But let's get the ballots in. That whole early voting election month process takes the focus away from the individual voter as part of a community, gathering information, making a decision, and pushes it into Team A and Team B just marshaling all they can. And to be honest, the Democrats are much better at it. And when listening to the national news, I think, oh, I kind of got this earlier, I guess, just because I'm in Colorado. Colorado embraced early voting and mail-in voting very early, long before COVID, and other states did so. So it's kind of the way it is on the ground here. Not that the Republicans have figured that out too well, but early voting has its problems, and not just potentially more fraud and more manipulating the process, but voters just not having the full campaign, the full level of information before they make a decision on election day. Okay, that said, it means, on both counts, both in the attitudes people have and in the systems we are choosing to collect ballots and have our elections, that elections are more national and not so local. When I was young in the 70s and 80s, the conventional wisdom was all politics is local, and you could see that. You'd have more eccentric, more interesting representatives to Congress, and you'd have conservative Democrats and liberal Republicans, a bigger mix of personalities and ideologies. A lot of that's gone now. There's just not much of the local connection anymore, I'm afraid. And as a guy who loves where he comes from and believes in localism, that's a problem for me. All right, well, I promised we'll talk about local things, right? So let's talk more about my home state of Colorado, the land of citizen initiatives and referred questions from our General Assembly. Some of you know what I mean, but some states don't have this. Some states actually just vote for people. But in Colorado and in California and other states with this tradition, we have the ability to put issues on the ballot. People don't just vote for candidates. They say, do I agree or not agree with this issue that's put before the voters? So that can come from the citizens themselves initiating an item, or it can come from the legislature saying, well, we're not sure, let's let the people decide, and putting it on the ballot. And it can be both a statute, a law, or a change to the state constitution. I won't go through everything we did in Colorado in this cycle, but let me check my notes here. I am going to talk about what we did in Colorado, and you tell me if these things are consistent. We lowered our state income tax rates. Okay. We legalized mushrooms, quotation marks, mushrooms, for medicinal purposes. You could put quotation marks on that too. We increased taxes on higher income earners to support free breakfast and lunch for every public school child in Colorado. Well, I kind of summarize this as the wisdom of the Colorado voter. cut my taxes and give me shrooms so rich people can feed my children. It's a glorious moment in the history of free government. I think the maybe least controversial part of this, would probably be the part where we feed the kids, right? Everybody believes in feeding kids. This is where I find my... Okay, here we go. Right, who would be against feeding children? Well, I guess this is where I get a little controversial. I don't think we should necessarily subsidize families feeding their children. We should encourage families to feed themselves and not make feeding their children a government responsibility. This is terribly controversial. I need a caveat here. It's a true one. We absolutely need a safety net for people who are struggling. But in Colorado, we have that already. I mean, we're awash in food here. It's very easy to qualify for free breakfast and lunch in our schools. We have programs that send food home over the weekend. We have programs that feed children all through the summer. So when I see all that, I kind of look around and say, in a better world, I would rather teach parents to shop for food, grow food, prepare food, rather than send home loads of processed food just to make them think their kids were always going to be provided for in some other way. I guess I'm a dinosaur. I think we should encourage people to take care of their own kids. And we should also understand that some people can't and they're struggling and have help for that. But we should always be nudging them towards, get to a place where you can, right? Feel responsible. Feel like you can produce. You can take care of your own family. I run into a lot of people who are good-hearted. They run these programs. They volunteer. But I want to ask them, what do you think of these people? Are they just clients, dependents? This isn't a zoo. You can't just indefinitely take the responsibility to feed other people's children. You expect them to take care of their own families and go out and vote? They're fellow citizens, right? How do you hold on to dignity and equality and decency if you think there's just going to be a permanent responsibility for feeding other people's children? And look at it from the perspective not of these people I talk to who are serving others, they think, but from the ones who are served. Are these students and families fed a dozen meals a week by the state, learning to be confident, joyful producers? I mean, what is the goal here? Are they learning new skills and self-reliance? Are they learning that it's up to them, that they can do it, that they have dignity and worth, and they can handle whatever comes? And if they need help sometimes, that's fine. But deep down, they can do it. Or are they learning to be permanently dependent on others? Some of this is, we've lost the focus on families as opposed to just individuals that we can count and categorize. I don't think there was ever a golden age of families. There's always been struggle and dysfunction and difficulty. But let's just think of an idea of a family economy. I mean, economy originally meant oikonomos, right? Yeah, okay. Meaning a household that made things and did things. It was the place of production. There used to be a family economy of producers. You'd have a cross-generational group of people looking out for the family as a shared enterprise. And they were doing their parts to produce what needed to be done to sustain life. I mean, that was real stuff. That was growing food in the fields and tending livestock and learning skills and trades and trading with others, finding a way to make a living and take care of your family. And that meant taking care of not just yourselves, but of the generation coming up and the one that was fading away. The father in the fields and the mother in the home were at the heart of this, but older relatives participated until they couldn't anymore. And children, once totally dependent, learned more and more by example and contributed and became producers in the family as they grew older. And I'm not going to romanticize subsistence farming. Life was precarious, and the bigger societies were built on hierarchies and slavery and cruelty for many centuries. And part of that was just the fact that Industrial Revolution changed the way we looked at things. It harnessed something besides muscle power and wood. I mean, think of how precious labor was and how little there was to extend it and make it stronger until new technologies made everything different. But I will say, the Industrial Revolution came at a price, because you created this idea of producing outside the home. Maybe it was good, maybe in net it really was good, but it created problems of its own. You took the people who produced at home and sent them out to work in a factory, a new place where production was done. Okay, we got used to that. Production outside the home became mass production in factories. An amazing surplus of labor. Surplus of labor is the wrong word, pardon me. An amazing use of the specialization of labor to create a surplus of product. Wonderful thing, right? If everybody specializes in different things, we can create much more, share it, get wealthier. We hope that's shared somewhat equitably, but let's give some of the rewards, of course, to the people who figured out how to do it. But it does redefine how society works, mass production. What does mass production need? Mass consumption, advertising, the creation of need, the creation of people seeing themselves as people who want more than they ever knew they wanted and need to absorb that production that comes from what we've done. I like the idea of people being comfortable and happy and having what they need. But where does this get off the rails? I think it gets off the rails when people think of themselves more as consumers than as producers. And you can see it happening now. So many people work and money comes in, but the division of labor means that it's not really clear to anybody what they're really doing. How valuable is this work? What are you really producing? Well, I'm just part of this organization. I'm part of this government. I fill my quota. Things come in. More and more you get separated from actually doing things and seeing the fruit of that come back to you. And so as we look around, we see people being turned into consumers. They step out of the workforce and they're still supported. They may not even care about taking care of their children, but they're still supported. It's just consume, 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 and get ever further away from actually making the things that are real, that feed people, that sustain people. And that concerns me. Do you think it just ends there, where people wait till someone else takes care of them? No, humans are very ingenious. They'll come up with new things to worry about. And whether it's from the bottom up or the top down, we're seeing the creation of a whole new consumer economy right now. What's my gender today? Who am I today? Am I human or not? I don't know. I might be something new, something different. It's not a real fluidity. Reality always comes back. It's a false fluidity. But that's what people are seeing right now. They're not sure who they are. They're cut off from families. They're cut off from productive work. And so they're embracing all kinds of strange new identities and new consumer identities. And others look around, are profiting from that. So I would just encourage people to go beyond that, to resist that, and to decide that I'm still going to be a producer. I'm not going to hear that siren song that the whole world is telling me to be transhuman, to be better than what's ever been before, to be smarter than anyone else, to know more in my heart than anyone else has ever known before, to believe in transhumanism. to believe that I can be something new, a different gender, a different kind, something special that's never existed before. We'll whisper in your ear forever, and we'll sell it you new things forever and ever. What has that done to us? I mean, shattered and separated families? Collapsing birth rate, in case you haven't noticed. Something else the Reactionary Hippie mentioned earlier. Soaring mental illness, deaths of despair. We don't feel like we produce anything that matters. We don't feel connected to anyone. So we fall into just consuming new identities. Can't do it. All right, I've gone off too much on this one. Let me suggest something. I mean, Reactionary Hippie always believes in the popular culture that's around us. So let me remind you of a movie that my kids like to watch called Wall-E. It predates them even, but it holds up pretty well. The humans and the good ship Axiom in Wall-E, after generations of floating through space, being catered to by robots, catered to as consumers. Well, how do they look in that movie? They're flabby, they're dependent, they're decadent, right? They're obese on the outside, they're dull-witted, dependent, fragile on the inside. When you look around now, don't you see some of that? It's going to get worse until it gets better. See, that wasn't such a happy note until it was. Because reality always intrudes. You can't fight against true humanity and the reality that nothing's free. Breakfasts and lunches aren't free. Someone always pays. You can't eat up all the capital and seed corn that your ancestors built up and think it's not going to come back to haunt you. You need to build things up of your own. You need to be a producer. You need to be grounded in a family. You need to look out for others. Be a light and a beacon to other people. And know that you're imperfect too, and you're going to fail and fail and fail. But hang in there, because the Reactionary Hippie is a short-term pessimist and a long-term optimist. And you should be too. Will you please do your best? I will too. Take care, and thanks for your time.